What happens when Hollywood royalty meets daytime television and refuses to play by the rules? In just 31 seconds, a single comment would shatter years of carefully crafted public image and expose the real person behind the polished facade. Jimmy Kimmel adjusted his tie as the cameras rolled for what should have been another routine celebrity interview. The Late Night with Jimmy Kimmel show had hosted countless A-listers over the years, but tonight felt different. There was an electric tension in the studio air as Meghan Markle settled into the guest chair, her posture rigid and her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Welcome to the show, Meghan," Jimmy said with his trademark warmth, leaning forward slightly. "Thanks for being here tonight. I know you've been keeping busy with your various projects." Meghan's response came sharp and immediate. "Well, Jimmy, I wouldn't exactly call changing the world keeping busy, but I suppose that's one way to put it." The studio audience laughed nervously, unsure if they'd just witnessed a joke or something else entirely. Jimmy's eyebrows raised just a fraction, but his professional smile never wavered. "Right, of course. Your humanitarian work has always been impressive," he replied diplomatically. "I wanted to start by talking about your recent podcast series. The response has been pretty mixed from what I understand." Meghan's jaw tightened visibly. "Mixed? I think you mean revolutionary, Jimmy. But I'm not surprised that some people can't handle the truth when it's presented to them so directly." "Well, let's talk about some of the specific episodes," Jimmy continued, clearly trying to steer the conversation towards safer ground. "The one about workplace dynamics seemed to strike a chord with a lot of people." "It struck a chord because I was brave enough to say what everyone else was thinking," Meghan interrupted, her voice rising slightly. "I've worked in environments where people think they can push you around just because of who you are or where you come from." Jimmy nodded thoughtfully. "That must have been challenging. Can you give us some examples without naming specific people or places?" Meghan let out a laugh that sounded more like a scoff. "Oh, Jimmy, you really want me to dance around the truth, don't you? That's exactly the problem with this industry. Everyone wants to pretend that everything is fine when it's not." The host shifted in his chair, maintaining his composure despite the growing tension. "I'm just trying to have a conversation here, Meghan. Help our audience understand your perspective." "My perspective?" Meghan's voice took on an edge that made several audience members shift uncomfortably in their seats. "My perspective is that I've been treated unfairly by people who should have known better, and instead of acknowledging that, everyone wants to make me the villain." Jimmy paused for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "I don't think anyone here sees you as a villain. We're just having a discussion about your work and your experiences. Are we, Jimmy? Because it feels like you're trying to minimize everything I've been through." Meghan's hands were now clenched in her lap, her knuckles white against the studio lights. "Do you have any idea what it's like to have your every word twisted and analyzed by people who have never walked in your shoes?" The host took a deep breath, his professional training kicking in. "I can only imagine how difficult that must be. But isn't that part of being in the public eye? We all deal with criticism and scrutiny." "We all?" Meghan's voice rose another notch. "Jimmy, with all due respect, you have no idea what I've been through. The level of scrutiny I've faced is unlike anything you could possibly understand." Jimmy's smile flickered for just a moment before returning to full wattage. "You're absolutely right. I can't fully understand your specific experiences. That's why I'm asking you to share them with us." "Share them?" Meghan laughed bitterly. "So you can edit them down into sound bites and take them out of context? So your producers can create some dramatic moment for social media?" The studio had grown noticeably quiet. Even the camera operators seemed to sense that something was going off script. Jimmy maintained his composure, but there was a slight tension in his voice when he spoke again. "Meghan, I can assure you that's not our intention here. We want to give you a platform to tell your story in your own words." "Your platform," she repeated, emphasizing each word. "That's interesting, Jimmy. Because last I checked, I didn't need anyone's permission to speak my truth." Jimmy nodded slowly. "Of course not. But you did agree to come on the show tonight." "I came here because I thought you were different," Meghan said, her voice dripping with disappointment. "I thought maybe you would actually listen instead of just waiting for your turn to talk." The host leaned back slightly, clearly taken aback by the accusation. "I am listening, Meghan. I'm trying to understand your point of view." "No, you're not," she snapped. "You're sitting there with your prepared questions and your fake concern, pretending to care about what I have to say when really you just want to create some kind of spectacle." Jimmy's professional mask slipped just slightly. "Meghan, I think you might be misreading the situation here. I genuinely want to have a meaningful conversation with you." "Meaningful?" Meghan stood up abruptly, causing a stir among the production crew. There's nothing meaningful about this, Jimmy. This is just another talk show trying to capitalize on drama. Please sit down, Jimmy said gently, gesturing toward the chair. Let's work through this. Work through what? Meghan remained standing, her voice growing louder. Work through your need to make me look bad? Work through your audience's expectations for entertainment at my expense? The studio audience was now completely silent, the tension palpable. Jimmy stood up as well, trying to regain control of the situation. Nobody wants to make you look bad, Meghan. We invited you here because we respect your work and wanted to give you a chance to discuss it. Respect my work? Meghan's laugh was sharp and humorless. Jimmy, if you respected my work, you wouldn't be asking me these ridiculous questions about mixed responses and workplace dynamics. You'd be asking me about the real issues. What real issues would you like to discuss? Jimmy asked, his voice steady despite the chaos unfolding around him. The real issues? Meghan's eyes flashed with something dangerous. How about the fact that certain people in certain positions have made it their mission to destroy my reputation? How about the fact that I've been silenced and marginalized by people who are supposed to be family? Jimmy held up his hands in a calming gesture. Okay, let's talk about that if you want to. Don't patronize me, Jimmy, Meghan shot back. I can see right through that fake sympathy act. The host's patience was clearly wearing thin, though he continued to maintain his professional demeanor. I'm not trying to patronize you, Meghan. I'm trying to have a conversation. A conversation? Meghan's voice reached a new peak. This isn't a conversation, Jimmy. This is an ambush disguised as an interview. How is this an ambush? Jimmy asked, genuine confusion creeping into his voice. These are standard interview questions. Standard for who? Meghan demanded. Standard for people you want to make look unstable? Standard for people you want your audience to turn against? The production team was now scrambling behind the cameras, clearly unsure how to handle the rapidly deteriorating situation. Jimmy looked toward his producers, then back at his guest. Meghan, I think we should take a break, he said calmly. A break? She repeated mockingly. So you can regroup and figure out how to spin this? So you can edit this down to make me look like the crazy one? No, Jimmy replied firmly. So we can both take a moment to reset and continue this conversation in a more productive way. There is no more productive way, Jimmy, Meghan said, her voice now trembling with rage, because you've already decided what story you want to tell. Meghan, please, Jimmy said, his voice taking on a more serious tone. Let's just sit down and talk this through like adults. Like adults? Meghan's laugh was bitter and sharp. Jimmy, adults don't ambush each other on national television. Adults don't pretend to be supportive while secretly planning to tear someone down. Nobody is trying to tear you down, Jimmy insisted, taking a small step forward. But you're making this very difficult for everyone involved. I'm making this difficult? Meghan's voice cracked with incredulity. Jimmy, you invited me here under false pretenses. You told my team this would be a friendly conversation about my projects, not an interrogation about my personal life. Jimmy shook his head slowly. I asked you about your podcast and your work. Those are your projects. Don't play word games with me, Meghan snapped. You know exactly what you're doing. The way you phrased those questions, the way you brought up the criticism, the way you're looking at me right now, like I'm some kind of unstable person who can't handle a simple interview. I'm looking at you like someone who's clearly upset, Jimmy replied evenly, and I'm trying to figure out how we got here. How we got here? Meghan's eyes blazed with fury. We got here because you decided to be just like everyone else in this industry. You decided to treat me like I'm some kind of problem that needs to be managed instead of a person who deserves respect. The studio audience was now completely frozen, afraid to even cough or shift in their seats. Several people in the front row were visibly uncomfortable, looking between Meghan and Jimmy like spectators at a tennis match gone horribly wrong. Meghan, I have nothing but respect for you, Jimmy said carefully. But respect goes both ways. Respect goes both ways? Meghan repeated, her voice rising to a near shout. Jimmy, you have no idea what real disrespect looks like. You sit in your comfortable little studio every night making jokes about people's lives, and you think that gives you the right to judge others? Jimmy's jaw tightened slightly. I'm not judging anyone. I'm trying to do my job. Your job, Meghan said with venom. Your job is to entertain people at other people's expense. Your job is to make sure your ratings stay high by creating drama and controversy. That's not what this show is about, Jimmy replied, his voice growing firmer. We try to have meaningful conversations with our guests. Meaningful? Meghan threw her hands up in exasperation. There's nothing meaningful about this, Jimmy. This is a circus, and you're the ringmaster trying to make me dance for your audience. Nobody is asking you to dance, Jimmy said, his patience clearly wearing thin. I asked you some basic questions about your work and you've turned this into something completely different. I've turned this into something different? Meghan's voice reached a new octave. Jimmy, you're the one who brought up the criticism. You're the one who questioned the response to my work. You're the one who made this personal. Asking about public reaction to your public work isn't making it personal, Jimmy countered. It's basic journalism. Journalism? Meghan laughed harshly. Is that what you call this? Jimmy, you're not a journalist. You're an entertainer who thinks he can play investigative reporter when it suits him. The insult hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Jimmy's professional mask finally cracked completely, his eyes flashing with genuine anger for the first time since the interview began. You know what, Meghan? Jimmy said, his voice dropping to a dangerously quiet level. I've been doing this show for over 20 years. I've interviewed presidents, world leaders, Nobel Prize winners, and Hollywood legends. And in all that time, I've never had a guest come on here and attack me personally for doing my job. Maybe that's because you've never had a guest who was willing to call you out on your behavior. Meghan shot back without missing a beat. My behavior? Jimmy's voice rose despite his attempts to maintain control. Meghan, you've been hostile from the moment you sat down. You've accused me of ambushing you, of having ulterior motives, of being fake and manipulative. And for what? Because I asked you about your work? Because you questioned my work, Meghan corrected fiercely. Because you implied that it wasn't well received. Because you treated me like I was some kind of controversial figure instead of someone who's trying to make a positive difference in the world. I never implied anything, Jimmy said firmly. I stated a fact. The response to your podcast has been mixed. That's not an opinion. That's documented reality. Documented by who? Meghan demanded. By the same media outlets that have been trying to destroy my reputation for years? By the same critics who have never given me a fair chance? Jimmy ran his hand through his hair, clearly struggling to maintain his composure. Meghan, I don't know what else to tell you. I'm just trying to have a conversation here. No, you're not, Meghan insisted. You're trying to make me look bad. You're trying to get me to say something controversial so you can have your viral moment. If anyone is creating a viral moment here, it's you, Jimmy said, his voice finally showing real frustration. I've been nothing but professional and courteous, and you've been attacking me since the moment we started. Professional and courteous? Meghan's laugh was sharp and mocking. Jimmy, there's nothing professional about setting someone up to fail. There's nothing courteous about pretending to be supportive while secretly planning to embarrass them. I'm not embarrassing you, Jimmy said through gritted teeth. You're embarrassing yourself. The words hit Meghan like a physical blow. Her face went white, then flushed deep red with rage. I'm embarrassing myself? She repeated, her voice trembling with fury. Jimmy, the only thing embarrassing about this situation is that you think you can treat people this way and get away with it. Treat people what way? Jimmy demanded. I asked you normal interview questions. You're the one who turned this into a confrontation. Normal interview questions? Meghan's voice was now shaking with rage. Jimmy, nothing about this has been normal. From the moment I walked out here, you've been looking at me like I'm some kind of ticking time bomb waiting to explode. Maybe because you are, Jimmy muttered under his breath, but the studio microphones picked up every word. The comment landed like a bomb in the already tense atmosphere. Meghan's mouth fell open in shock, and for a moment, complete silence filled the studio. Excuse me? Meghan said, her voice dangerously quiet. Jimmy realized his mistake immediately. I didn't mean. You didn't mean what? Meghan cut him off, her voice rising back to a shout. You didn't mean to reveal what you really think of me? You didn't mean to show your true colors? Meghan, let me explain. Explain what? She demanded. Explain how you really see me? Explain how this whole thing was designed to make me look unstable from the very beginning? The moment hung between them like a live wire, crackling with dangerous energy. Jimmy's face had gone pale as he realized the gravity of his slip, while Meghan stood trembling with a rage so pure it seemed to radiate from her entire being. You think I'm a ticking time bomb? Meghan's voice was eerily calm now, which somehow made it even more terrifying. You think I'm some kind of unstable person who can't handle a simple conversation? Meghan, that's not what I meant, Jimmy said quickly, his hands raised in a placating gesture. I was frustrated, and I spoke without thinking. Without thinking? Meghan's laugh was cold and hollow. Jimmy, that's exactly the problem. You don't think. You just react based on whatever preconceived notions you have about people. The studio crew had stopped pretending to work, all eyes fixed on the unfolding disaster. The audience sat in stunned silence, some people covering their mouths in shock, others filming with their phones despite the no recording policy. "Look, I apologize," Jimmy said, his voice strained. "That was unprofessional of me." "Unprofessional?" Meghan repeated, her voice dripping with disdain. "Jimmy, unprofessional doesn't even begin to cover what just happened here. You just revealed your true opinion of me on live television." "It's not live," Jimmy said weakly, then immediately regretted the words. "It's not live?" Meghan's voice rose to a shriek. "So you think you can just edit this out? You think you can pretend this never happened?" "That's not what I meant," Jimmy said desperately. "I just meant that we can take a break, collect ourselves, and figure out how to move forward." "Move forward?" Meghan's eyes blazed with fury. "Jimmy, there is no moving forward from this. You just showed everyone exactly who you really are." Jimmy took a deep breath, trying one last time to salvage the situation. "Meghan, we're both upset right now. Why don't we just take 5 minutes? And 5 minutes to what?" Meghan interrupted. 5 minutes for you to come up with a better strategy to humiliate me? 5 minutes for your producers to figure out how to spin this disaster? "Nobody is trying to humiliate you," Jimmy said, his own anger finally breaking through his professional facade. "But you've made it impossible to have any kind of reasonable conversation." "Reasonable?" Meghan's laugh was sharp and bitter. "Jimmy, what's reasonable about calling someone a ticking time bomb on your own show?" "I was trying to explain why I felt like I was walking on eggshells," Jimmy shot back. "You've been hostile and combative since the moment you sat down." "I've been defending myself," Meghan corrected fiercely, "but clearly you see any woman who stands up for herself as hostile and combative." "This has nothing to do with you being a woman," Jimmy said through gritted teeth. "Doesn't it?" Meghan challenged. "Jimmy, would you ever call a male guest a ticking time bomb? Would you ever treat a man the way you've treated me tonight?" Jimmy paused, clearly struggling to find the right words. "I treat all my guests with respect until they make it impossible to do so." "Until they make it impossible?" Meghan's voice rose to a near scream. "Jimmy, I came here in good faith to talk about my work, and you turned it into an attack on my character." "I never attacked your character," Jimmy protested. "I asked you about public reaction to your podcast." "You questioned my work," Meghan spat. "You implied that it wasn't successful. You made me defend myself from the moment I sat down." "I stated facts," Jimmy replied firmly. "If you can't handle people discussing your work objectively, maybe you shouldn't be putting it out there for public consumption." The words hit Meghan like a slap. Her face went white with rage, and for a moment, she seemed to vibrate with barely contained fury. "Maybe I shouldn't be putting my work out there?" she repeated, her voice dangerously quiet. "Jimmy, my work is about giving voice to people who have been silenced. My work is about standing up to bullies and exposers like you. People like me." Jimmy's voice rose as his own anger finally boiled over. "Meghan, I've done nothing but try to be professional while you've spent the last 30 minutes attacking me personally." "Professional?" Meghan's laugh was harsh and grating. "Jimmy, there's nothing professional about what just happened here. You showed your true colors when you called me a ticking time bomb. And you've been proving me right ever since," Jimmy snapped, immediately regretting the words as soon as they left his mouth. "Proving you right?" Meghan's voice reached a pitch that made several audience members wince. "Jimmy, the only thing I've proven is that I won't let people like you walk all over me." "People like me?" Jimmy repeated, his voice heavy with resignation. "You keep saying that. What exactly do you think I am, Meghan?" "You're someone who thinks they can tear down others to build themselves up," Meghan said, her voice shaking with rage. "You're someone who hides behind the pretense of journalism while really just trying to create drama for ratings." "That's not who I am," Jimmy said quietly, his anger finally giving way to genuine hurt. "Isn't it?" Meghan challenged. "Then why did you bring up the criticism of my work? Why did you question the response to my podcast? Why did you make me defend myself instead of actually listening to what I had to say?" Jimmy stared at her for a long moment, his professional mask completely gone now. "Because that's what interviews are, Meghan. We discuss your work, including how it's been received. That's not an attack, that's journalism." "And there it is," Meghan said triumphantly. "You just admitted it. You see me as a subject to be dissected, not a person to be respected." "I see you as someone who can't handle basic questions about your own work," Jimmy replied, his voice flat and tired. "Basic questions?" Meghan's voice rose one final time. "Jimmy, nothing about this has been basic. You've questioned my credibility, my work, my reactions, and my character. And when I defended myself, you called me a ticking time bomb." The studio had fallen into an eerie silence. Even the crew had stopped moving, frozen by the raw intensity of the confrontation unfolding before them. "You know what?" Meghan said, suddenly calm again. "I'm done here. I'm done with this show. I'm done with this conversation. And I'm done with people like you who think they can treat others this way." She turned toward the exit, then paused and looked back at Jimmy one last time. "I hope your audience sees this for what it really is," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the silent studio. "I hope they see how you really treat people when you think the cameras will protect you." With that, Meghan Markle walked off the set, leaving Jimmy Kimmel standing alone in the wreckage of what was supposed to have been a simple promotional interview. The studio remained silent for several long seconds before the sound of her heels clicking on the floor finally faded away, and the reality of what had just happened began to sink in for everyone involved. Jimmy stood there for a moment longer, looking out at his stunned audience, then finally turned to his producers with an expression of complete bewilderment. The professional host finally at a complete loss for words.